United Nations Association Orange County had the absolute pleasure to present the event, Stories of Hope and Solidarity, at St. Mark Presbyterian Church in Newport Beach. Guests enjoyed meaningful conversation and refreshments before the evening centerpiece. A special screening featuring selected clips from the award-winning film, The Voice of Hind Rajah, followed by a discussion from our wonderful panel, exploring themes of hope, resilience, and solidarity with Gaza.
What a beautiful performance. This is amazing. And Nasir Musa is one of the most wonderful players, as you have witnessed. Thank you so much. One more time. Nasir Musa is a renowned musician who has worked with numerous pop stars like Shakira and Beyonce, and it's a great honor for us today to have him here with us. Hello everyone, my name is Mr. Mahes. It's a privilege to serve as the Vice President of the United Nations Association of Orange County Chapter, and I serve as the Chair of the Women's Affinity Group. All right, as the Women's Affinity Group, what we do? We do a vital work to uplift women's voices, address issues that impact them locally and globally. We strive towards advancing the values of UN Sustainable Development Goals. Here we are. We focus on Sustainable Development Goal number 5, which is gender equality. What does that mean? We are deeply committed to the protection of women's rights, girls' rights, which include the rights to education, healthcare, and equal opportunities in career and leadership. Our mission is to educate, inform, and actively engage our community, giving individuals the tools and the confidence to create meaningful, lasting change. We achieve this through collaboration. Collaboration is number 17. How we collaborate? We collaborate with organizations and educational institutions that share our beliefs and values. Education is the foundation of progress. Let me take a moment to express my gratitude to St. Mark Presbyterian Church. For graciously welcoming and sharing with us their space today, as they have done many times before. Your continued support allows us to bring this valuable conversation to life. Thank you so much. Pastor Mark will share with us the meaningful and impactful work that they do at this church, which means a lot to the Palestinian children. Here he is. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I am Mark Davis, and for the last 12 years, I've had the honor of serving as the pastor of this congregation. It is a congregation of people committed to serving God in the world, committed to interfaith dialogue and appreciation, intercultural understanding. All the values that brought you into the door are the values we share with you. But we also share with you the common tragedy that has brought us all here. And with hearts broken, with feelings of frustration, anger, powerlessness, we've done what we can. We write letters, we march, we rally. My family and I got to be part of a pro-Palestinian rally in London 4 weeks ago. We do what we can. And as people of faith, one thing we can do is pray. So every week, we have the children of Palestine in our prayers. And we understand that caring about children is low-hanging fruit. With every child, there are parents, there are grandparents, there are communities that are heartbroken and struggling. So we have had all of our Palestinian siblings in our prayers throughout this time. And we will continue to do that until a day when peace and justice kiss.
Thank you, Pastor Mark. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you. The executive film producer of The Voice of Hind Raja, will show clips of the film and he will elaborate about it. Please, Mohammed.
Thank you. Trying to...
Really?
Try? Yes, thank you.
I need the clip of it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Spain, and thank you all for being with us this afternoon. It's very meaningful to see such a large crowd in a church, so it's really heartwarming. So thank you for taking the time to be here. The film is really one of 3 films that I'm involved in, and I thought that I should try and maybe just before, some of you may know who Hind Raja is, some of you may not. And I thought just spend a minute telling you who is Hind Raja and why is this film has this name. It's called The Voice of Hind Raja. And these are the 3 films, by the way. So Palestine now is getting some traction. For the past few years, we were involved in several Palestinian films. They get lots of traction around the world in Europe, but when it comes to the United States, it seems Hollywood is pretty much has gatekeepers there that don't want to see this. Even distributors don't even dare, because if you dare to show a Palestinian film, you've kind of blacklisted and won't be allowed to participate again. This year, we're hoping that'll be a little bit different. Part of the reason is that there's a company called Watermelon Pictures that has undertaken So Watermelon are 2 brothers who have inherited the company from their father and their uncle, and they've made this, the reason it's called Watermelon, for those who may not know, the flag, the Palestinian flag, have the colors of the red, green, and black, and it was even considered anti-Semitic to carry the Palestinian flag. So the alternative was the watermelon. Nobody can come up and tell you watermelon are now, it's a symbol of resistance and a symbol of the colors of Palestine. And that's what watermelon is. So just briefly, one of the films that will be starting in theaters here in January, in 50 theaters across the United States, is Palestine 36. The reason Palestine 36 is relevant is because it tells the story in 1936. For those who know, Palestinian history, the Nakba, happened in 1948. So why are we doing a film in 1936 before where all the Palestinians were evicted and ethnically cleansed in 1948? It's because 1936 and prior, there was a strong effort by the British mandate to make sure that that effort does happen. What we see today is essentially a continuation of what the British started back in 1936 in what is known as the Peel Commission. Please, when you have a chance, see this film. It's amazing. It's very educational, and it has a lot of archival material as well. The other film that is amazing, that really touches you, and that's the beauty about filmmaking, is it doesn't just give you statistics and information. You go there and you participate in somebody's life story, and it emotionally touches you, and it gets into your heart, not just your mind. And this particular film is very, very powerful. And when you see the film, you will know why it was called All That Is Left of You. And I won't ruin it and tell you what's the name in the film. It's really powerful. And then the film that we're here to see today is called The Voice of Hind Rajab. So who is Hind Rajab, and why is she somebody that is who you want to make a film about? So Hind Rajab, even the encampments, the people in Colombia, when they decided to come out and do the encampment and resist and take over, they took over in a symbolic act, which is what was done in 1968 for the Black movement and for the civil rights liberties that we have. It was the same hall, Hamilton Hall, that was changed, and it was, in this case, called Hind's Hall. Is in Hamilton, Hind, the plain name. So she got attention. And unfortunately, even now, as we continue to see that we have a peace process and everybody's celebrating the big Trump plan, the reality is, as of yesterday, 100 Palestinians were killed in Gaza. This morning, up to coming in, there were 14 people killed today as well. And the killing continues, even though supposedly we have a peace plan. And what's embarrassing is that we're saying we're going to stop the killing. Stopping the killing is a national thing. It's not a plan. It's not a peace plan. A peace plan is to stop the occupation. It's to stop the apartheid. It's not just stop the killing. And unfortunately, even that hasn't happened. So the settlers continue to go and do all kinds of movements in the West Bank. And we have this ethnic cleansing continuing. Now they're shipping them in planes to South Africa. I don't know if you've seen that. The government facilitates shoving these people, getting them out. They even have to pay for it, not just simply send. And they're dumped in places in South Africa. Just go manage by yourself. So coming here is that the beauty is people of all faiths and all backgrounds and all countries have continued to resist and say, we won't just continue from, Pastor, it's amazing to know that you participated in one in London similar to this. And very often, like this, I believe, was in Australia, they have them in Italy, in Spain, and everywhere. I participated in one in Spain recently. I was there a few weeks ago. So the idea is, Hind Rajab, often you see signs saying, stop the killing. Hind Rajab has become a symbol. So with that, I will start. There's about 4 clips. The first being actually the trailer on the film.
We're a nonprofit that supports the United Nations. So we're global. We have chapters all over the world. In the US, we have about 200. Half of those are at universities. So we have a large engagement from youth. These are different from the model UN that you may have heard of, where they learned about the UN and debated. That's in high schools. The United Nations Association is an all-volunteer organization, and we're the Orange County chapter, and we focus very much on these kinds of issues. That's good. Just not.
The UN can never do its
I know. Yeah, exactly. We're just talking about technology. It's always so fun. But we focus on human rights. As you can see, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is really the core document for the UN and the core agreement for the world, which is what makes all of this so much more impactful and relevant. And then, of course, things like women's rights and the sustainable goals, like Ms. Rain said, and youth engagement is a major component of what we're about as well. So all I can say is, if you're interested in participating in other events that we put on, we welcome you. You don't have to become a member to join. We're very much about collaboration, and we look to collaborate with other organizations that are like-minded. Many of you are here. But if you're interested in joining, becoming a member, just go to our website at una-oc.org. You can find out about our programs. You can join up. We do have a Human Rights Day event coming up at Soka University on December 6th. That will be another good event. We have that every year there. So again, thank you very much for being here, and welcome.
The former mayor of Irvine, everybody knows Farah. Farah is a great inspiration to women in our community and to women at large. She was the first woman of a minority background to hold that office and to lead a major and important city in the United States. Throughout her career, Farah Khan has remained deeply committed to human rights. Okay, Farah, I will hand you the microphone, and now you take over. You will take my place, and I can enjoy the program now.
Thank you so much, Ms. Reed. Just going to give us all a minute to breathe. I don't think any of those clips were easy to take in. So I know I need a moment. But I'd like to introduce our panelists that we're going to be having a conversation with. And as we're having a conversation, we want to include you as well. So I know that we have members of the UNA team with cards that you can write your questions on. So if you have questions, please reach out to them. They're on either side of the aisles here. I'm going to start with Dr. Mohamed Males, who is the co-founder of IRA Capital, a U.S. real estate investment firm based in Irvine. And he serves on the board of trustees of the University of California in Irvine, where he established the chair in Islamic law. Dr. Males also serves on the board of trustees of Claremont Graduate University, where he established a chair in Islamic studies. He also established the nonprofit M-Film Lab, and is a co-founding member of the UCI Beale Applied Innovation Center. And for his humanitarian and philanthropic work, he received an honorary doctorate degree in Humane Letters from California State University, San Bernardino. And in November of last year, Dr. Males was recognized as the Outstanding Philanthropist of the Year at the National Philanthropy Day held in Orange County. Dr. Males has executive produced many films, including 2 PBS series and 2 Oscar-nominated films, along with the clips that you saw with Voice of Punjab. Our second guest is the amazing Arwa Damon, is a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Rafiq Hariri Center for the Middle East, and president and founder of the International Network for Aid, Relief, and Assistance, a nonprofit organization that focuses on building a network of logistical support and medical care to help children who need life-saving or life-altering medical treatment in war-torn nations. Until June of 2022, Damon, an award-winning journalist covering the Middle East, was a senior international correspondent based in CNN's Istanbul bureau. During her 16 years at CNN, she reported from across the region, including extensive coverage in Iraq and Syria. In 2018, she was awarded the George Foster Peabody Award for her reporting on the fall of ISIS in Iraq and Syria. In addition to winning 3 Emmys for that coverage, she also won an Emmy for Outstanding News Special for Return to Mosul. At the height of Europe's refugee crisis in 2015, Damon followed and reported on refugees from Syria and Iraq as they traveled across the continent by foot, by boat, and by train, resulting in coverage that earned her both an Emmy Award and a Gracie Award in 2016. Our third panelist is Tariq Al-Baba. He's a passionate and versatile filmmaker with over 2 decades of experience spanning television, documentaries, and narrative work. His work has appeared on platforms including Apple TV, Disney+, National Geographic, PBS, TRT World, Discovery, History, and Watermelon Pictures. His independent films explore historical injustices, urgent social issues, and threats to our natural world. His feature documentary debut, 36 Seconds, Portrait of a Hate Crime, premiered at DOC NYC in 2023. It earned international acclaim and multiple awards and is now available on major streaming platforms. In 2025, Tariq was named a Wincott Fellow for Public Media and selected for the Sundance Institute's prestigious Building Bridges Fellowship. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. So I want to start with all of you to share in your reporting, in your filmmaking, how do you pick a simple topic or an individual? How do you pick that moment that you hope is going to resonate with the rest of the world?
The problem is, over the past 2 years, we have become so numb. We start first feeling the ache and the pain the first day, the second day, the first week, the second week, and eventually the killing just becomes like it used to be that you feel that somebody doesn't have the ability to take a shower or the ability just to have a roof on top of their head. You start feeling the pain, but then when you start seeing that's happening to 10, then 100, then 1,000, like we start getting numb, right? And to be honest with you, over the past 2 years, I've probably aged many years over the last 2 years because every day, everything you hear, everything you follow, and of course for us who have family over there, it impacts you way more. So the point, to your point is, you're talking how do you capture the moment in filming. Well, it's so easy to sit here in lovely Orange County and say that, but it's people like Arwa and people who are actually in Gaza, who are actually there, seeing. And I would love that question to go to Arwa. How does she capture that moment? So Arwa, please, how do you do that?
You know, it's been an interesting trajectory for me because obviously when I went into Gaza, I didn't go wearing my journalism hat. I had left CNN by then, and just to remind everybody, journalists from the outside are not being permitted entry into Gaza by Israel. And I think the reason for that is quite simple, and it hit me every single time I went, and I've been 4 times since October 7th. And I would have gone more, but Israel actually ended up denying me entry earlier this year, and I do have an appeal in Israeli court right now. But what hit me within those first moments of entering Gaza is just this overwhelming sensation of, if the foreign media were allowed in, this would all be over in a minute. And that's not to take away anything from what the extraordinary Palestinian journalists have been reporting day after day. Their own lives, their own people, their own families being massacred and starved. But it's the troubling and disturbing reality that for whatever reason it is, or just call it what it is, racism, dehumanization, the vast majority of the Western world and the Western media has chosen to discredit and dismiss Gaza's reporting. But for me, what has always stood out for me in my journalism career is what I call points of relatability when entering these kinds of utterly overwhelming situations. And so you try to draw the viewer's eye to those small details, like what you saw in that clip, for example, pointing out that the pile of trash is taller than that little girl. And what I've also found is that when I put out these, smaller clips of basically life in Gaza, it's those absolutely human moments that really do grab people, because we have to remember that, as Muhammad mentioned, you do get overwhelmed, and a lot of people do get desensitized, or rather pushed into apathy when they're seeing these constant numbers being reported. And we have to constantly remind ourselves, and I say this from 17 years of experience in war zones, that is a very deliberate weapon that is in the arsenal of warring and or nefarious parties. Making you feel overwhelmed and hopeless and helpless is a war strategy. And that is why we, those of us who are putting content out, who are trying to storytell, have to constantly remember that and look at different ways to put out that content, to constantly remind people of what's happening inside in those very minute but extraordinarily human details.
Yeah, so what I could share is that, especially in the aftermath of October 7th, for many of us, it's just paralyzing. What can I do? There's only so much you could donate, depending on your family situation or your financial situation. You got to look at your own skill set. And as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, I felt compelled to continue telling our narratives. I've been working on the same feature script about my grandparents' story in Remla during 1948, and I never gave up. And I just knew that there would be a time where things would open up, or there would be a Watermelon Pictures. I prayed and I hoped. I didn't know if it was going to be within my lifetime, honestly. Like seeing those 3 films, which I've seen all 3, it's a dream come true, guys. Like this is insane. Like we did not think that it was going to happen in our lifetime, and there's momentum. And last year when an opportunity sprung up to tell my friend's story of his family near Tulkarm, in this really small village in the West Bank, his uncle was going to go. Everybody was talking him out of it, into Majnoon, like you're going to get hurt, that it's not safe. I jumped on. This is what I could do. I can bring a camera. I can go interview his family members. I could be a part of that story. So it's really, it's deeply, deeply personal for any filmmaker, for any journalist. It comes from this place from within, and that's what you're seeing on screen. It's not just like picking a topic that's commercially viable or a hot topic or trending. It has to come from within, deep within your soul, and that's where we operate from.
Talking about making films that for years just trying to get that out. I know here in this audience a filmmaker, but very similar. Hala, stand up for a minute, right? She's doing a film about Tantura, where her father is from, where she came. And again, these are like the empowering moments. It says, I can do it. I'm gonna go and I'm get it done. Because you get, these. And going to the journalists, it's one thing to say they're not allowing foreign journalists in, and these amazing journalists in Gaza trying to do the reporting, who are literally being targeted. 300 plus journalists have been killed. This is more than the entire journalists in all the war zones prior. That happened in the past 2 years alone, and they said, no, they're not targeted. This just happens to be. So it's amazing that our society and our journalistic standards, and I would have maybe everyone maybe comment on that they would not stand with their fellow journalists and make like the absolute biggest deal of targeting journalists. In fact, we're working on a documentary about journalists being targeted. But ultimately, it's get to the point where it has to, there's a book, by the way, if you haven't read it, a guy, wrote a film, wrote a book called There Will Be a Time When Everybody Would Think This, I don't want to picture the title, but there comes a time when people would know this was the right thing to do. So we all know what is our values. We all stand for what our values are. There's no different set of values, different places in the world. There's only one set of values, one set of truths. But when it comes to Palestine, we have been so dehumanized. Immediately, the media doesn't put it it just puts it Hamas. Like suddenly you dehumanize a group of people, and now you can say, kill them. Doesn't matter. They're killing the people. 60,000, 69,000, that's we know of, documented. One of the things that I had here, which I won't be showing, a friend of ours who works at the Washington Post actually published the names in the Washington Post of the kids who were killed and the people that were killed. And the Washington Post, to do that, she was at the risk of her losing her job. And it took her 3 months of back and forth before they agreed a simple thing to publish the names of people who were documentedly killed. So this is the sets of values that we're having, which is changing. People like, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson is sitting there and saying, wait a minute, what is that? If you dare to speak against Israel, you're anti-Semitic. Why? It's our country. Why can't we talk about anything that relates to people? So anyways, I'm going on a tangent here, but the reality is the press are such honorable people doing this every day, which is monumental.
So one of the things that we've heard and we know is that, this is the first time the genocide is being broadcast live, right? So it's happening in real time. We're seeing it in real time. And you mentioned the importance of press, but when, you've got people that are killing and targeting members of the press, but you've got individuals that are showing their stories. And when we are seeing these stories being told from the individual perspective, and it's coming into our phones, it's coming into our homes, share with us a little bit about, we talked a little bit about the differences when it comes to other communities that are targets or are victims of war or genocide, and then specifically when it comes to Palestinians. Why wasn't there the outrage that you would expect from people that believe in humanitarian causes at the onset of this? Why 2 years later, we're still watching it happen? And we're seeing around the world. I mean, you showed some clips. I know I've been in South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, even Spain, where people are outraged. Italy was massive in responding and asking for their government to do more. Where are we here today?
We could, Ottawa, if you want to start, and then I can comment after.
Thank you. I mean, look, there's a couple of things I think just to comment on, but I want to go back for a second to what Muhammad was saying about the 69,000 deaths. We need to keep in mind that that number is deaths that were caused by a weapon of war. That number doesn't include children and people who are dying of curable diseases. And there are all sorts of weird diseases that are cropping up all over Gaza. There's something called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is basically rapid onset paralysis. This is becoming especially prevalent in children under the age of 5. And my charity, Inada, has a couple of cases of kids who we're having to do physical therapy for because that's all we can do for them. And what this syndrome does, it's basically a nerve infection, is these kids are waking up one day and they're basically paralyzed. They can't move. This is normally very treatable, except in Gaza, you can't get the medication that you must administer to the child in the first month. Otherwise, the impact of it is permanent. These kids are becoming paralyzed because they're not getting the medication.
The doctors are targets. And so if you could share a little bit about that as well.
I just want to go back, you mentioned, why is there not more outrage? Why has it been so acceptable to demonize Palestinians and not see the humanity in us and what's happening to us? I think that for decades, we were told that we're not allowed to tell our stories. They were telling it for us, and there was an association with terrorism. There was an association with radicalism. And we can't blame it on the generations before us that came here. They were kind of in survival mode. They were building their communities. They were trying to ensure that their children were going to get education. So promoting folks like myself to become and pursue a filmmaking career in Hollywood just didn't happen. In fact, my family laughed at me. They thought I was crazy. I did not get any encouragement whatsoever. And the same thing is true for folks wanting to be journalists. The same thing is true for those who want to work in radio or media. It just didn't seem like it was an option. And we know, as we say now in Arabic, it's wrong. We have stories. We have passion. We are human beings. We should be allowed to tell our stories. I mean, just raise your hand. How many movies have you seen about World War II and the Holocaust? Is it hundreds? Is it thousands? Every single year they sweep the awards. Every single year there's more TV series. Every single year there's more documentaries. I just had a buddy who worked on a Netflix show, Hitler and the Nazis. It's like, have we not explored that subject matter enough? Like, we spent how much, do you remember in grade school how much time you actually spend on the Holocaust? Is it a semester? Is it a month? So my point is that I didn't learn about the Nakba growing up. I mean, I just heard it was legend from my grandmother. And I didn't know what to believe. Like, oh, okay, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe she's exaggerating. Maybe this is, falsified. Maybe, So my point is, it wasn't in our libraries. We didn't have as many books. It wasn't on the news. We weren't seeing our own films. So now the game has changed. Now we feel encouraged. We know that we are on the right side of history. And we know that folks who are trying to not acknowledge the horrific conditions that are happening on the ground and to our people are not going 10 years from now, are not going to be on the right side of history. So we need to build this momentum. We need to continue supporting filmmakers and encourage our daughters and our sons to be journalists if that's what they choose to do, because we're seeing that we have suffered because we were not allowed to tell our story.
Because once you were able to take people as being animals, and instead of people say, wow, how ugly they are, let's go get them. So that's one thing. The other thing here in the reporting, if you read any news article in any of the media in the United States, it will tell you 60 people killed. Yeah, like it's like, it's good idea. It doesn't tell you, bombs from Israeli jets, bombs, it's all the language. Yes, when it comes to the other side of October 7th, it is reported in the ugliest way. So we need to know we have so many forces act, and this is not like I'm saying this as just go read any article that pertains to the Palestine-Israel, and you will see the unfairness in the reporting. If you want to see some real reporting, try to see electronic intifada. And the word intifada, by the way, which they got our new mayor of New York, big shout for the Ramadan. Being principled and standing for values will pay. I mean, we can't just be afraid to stand for our values only because, that may sound to somebody offensive or anti-Semitic. If you're killing my people, I have the right to go there and say, stop it. And people were just saying, stop the genocide, stop the killing, release the hostages, also release the thousands of Palestinian prisoners that are being jailed with no crimes and no due process. But ultimately, I'll just say, finally, in terms of why this thing happened, when you have somebody like the Edelson family, one family who get their money from gambling, from casinos, not just in Vegas, but in Macau, they gave $600 million to the Republican Party. $600 million, one family. So, quid pro quo, you give me this, I get elected, and then you've got AIPAC, which now, in the entire Washington world, is starting to become a dirty word, is that if you're getting money from AIPAC, it means it's Israel first, not America first. So this is like a change. So some changes are happening, but you're right, we need to do the work. And finally, I wrote it down, I don't want to forget it. When you have somebody like Governor Abbott of Texas, designating our Civil Liberties Organization of CARE as a terrorist organization, right? I mean, what is that? But the beauty of it is now CARE and Muslim Legal Fund of America filed a lawsuit. Because on what grounds? You can't just come up with something. So for the first time, we're having to be able to stand up for our rights. This is a country of laws, and we go out and work within the system to get what's our rights. We got to earn it and fight for it. It's not granted.
I just want to add one thing to that. It's like, again, the older generations, there was this idea of like, Hollywood's run by certain people with certain opinions and this and that. Don't forget about the folks like myself who work and operate within the system. I'm starting to see more Muslim executives. I'm starting to see more Palestinian voices at production companies that matter. So let's work within the systems that we got to change it. So again, we have to empower the folks, the journalists at CNN, because I have strong opinions about CNN. But we know that there's good people that are putting in the work, putting their lives on the line.
So when you pick up on little things like that, you're really looking at equity being diminished. What needs to happen is that we, as a community, need to speak in words and terms that equate both. So if it's a hostage on this side, there are hostages there too. I mean, they would be prisoners if they were convicted of a crime. And there are no crimes for the thousands and thousands of people, even children that are held in prison. Those are hostages. And they're not only hostages, but they're also abused. And that news keeps coming out, but it doesn't come out as much here. So maybe we can talk a little bit about what are the options for our communities to get the news that is more realistic, that is more authentic, that is equitable.
Well, I've done some work with Zateo. How many, show of hands, how many people know about Zateo? So Mehdi Hassan and his team, they're doing excellent work. You know, it's tough for the average consumer because, again, if you're paying for cable and you got your MSNBC, you've got your, CNN, you've got your Fox, you have to step outside of these legacy media companies and support the new companies like Zateo. Again, if you haven't heard about Watermelon Pictures yet, they do have a streaming platform called Watermelon Plus. So you're going to see a lot of these groundbreaking documentaries on that. But I admit that it's tough. Again, I have 2 young kids. I pay for Netflix. I pay for Hulu. Now all of a sudden I have to pay for these other subscribers. But it is important. And maybe don't get your latte 4 times a week and you could afford it or something like that. The idea of words matter. And like Mohammed said earlier, I think there's such value in being in rooms like this. There's so much noise online and in social media, and we've missed out on this dialogue and being able to expand on our thoughts and our feelings. And I have a strong opinion about just saying ceasefire now or stop the genocide. We have to go beyond that. We want to stop the oppression. We cannot live under an apartheid regime any longer. So it's hard when you're restricted to the amount of words or the amount of time on TikTok. So I just encourage you all to continue doing what you're doing. Being in this room is so very important, and bring people from outside of our community so that we can go beyond those 4 headline grabbing words.
An amazing, I think, and thank you all so much for being here and being in the space, but this is my dear friend Tanya, who just got out of that a month ago. House in Hudson when she was working for another charity. And when I was telling her that, this was happening in a church in America and that people were coming to listen to, what was happening over there and what was happening to Gaza, I also felt so deeply appreciative that it was a very unique opportunity, to hear from someone who's actually been living through what a lot of us have just been watching on our TV screens. And, maybe it's worth hearing from her about what life is really like there and what life means for the people of Gaza, but also what this concept of resistance also means and how it's defined for, people like you.
Hi everyone, I would like to say thank you for holding such an amazing event. I think one of the biggest things that give us hope as Palestinians and as Gazans going through this is the kind of unwavering solidarity that we've been so privileged to have from different people from different parts of the world. Really all across, because we have this piece of shared humanity.
No cheating!
So the idea that we are being seen and heard, and that a lot of people are trying to platform what has happened and what is happening is incredibly. You can't put it in words. And I think if we want to talk about resilience, we get a lot of energy out of that. We get a lot of. Honestly, the past few years have been unmanageable. The literal lifeline that a lot of people have been getting is the support. Either if it was literal the aid or just the act of solidarity that we've been getting.
Can you share with us a little bit more about yourself? When were you last in Gaza? What do you do? What's your background? Just so that we can be aware of a little bit more about yourself.
Okay. So my name is Hania. My name is Hania Jamal. I'm 28 years old. My background is I had a degree in English literature, and I was teaching English for high school students before the war, and I was also teaching English as second language to children and young professionals. That was my life before the war. I was on way to get a master's degree in the US. I was nominated for the Fulbright Award, the Fulbright Scholarship, and then the war happened, right? And then that was in reality my plan that I made so thoroughly kind of went out of the window, and we were left with this reality where nothing is the same, and you were left with either one of two choices. Either you choose to be just surrender to the fact that you are an infected population now, or try to do more. This is where I made the shift of working in humanitarian sector, which I started out with an organization called Global Empowerment Mission. I was their liaison officer, and that was an organization that was working in partnership with INARA. And this is actually how I met Arwa.
Can I just sidebar here for a second? So the first time that Hania and I met was 2 days after the World Central Kitchen strike.
Yeah.
And Hania had two of her expat staff who were in country staying in the guest house, who were these ex-military guys. So the whole plan was it'll be fine for me to go in because I'll be crashing with these two ex-military guys, except they evacuated right afterwards and kind of did a handoff with me at the border, and then I crossed into Gaza, and then there's Hania, and it's just the two of us staying in this house with a broken generator and trying to sit in the dark so that we could conserve battery power from the solar panels, which is how we ended up kind of, bonding over a lot of experiences.
Yeah, pretty much. So yeah, for the past 2 years, I will keep coming in and doing more work. And even when I switched my work from the first organization I was working in, I was working as their liaison officer, but then at some point you realize that you want more agency and you want to help people in the way that you see need, regarding help. I mean, a lot of people come in with the best intention, but then again, you need a local on the ground to be also facilitating that, which is again, one of the amazing things that our organization does, is that they rely completely on local staff. So I transitioned from that, and I was working as a project coordinator, which meant that I was more involved in the projects and in the ground and on the ground, and also programming and all of that stuff. We maintained a working relationship, and that it has been incredibly a privilege to be working in that, it was literally the only way that we were able to survive, that I was able to survive, is working in that in AIDS. Because it gave me personally purpose that I lacked, because you look at everything and everything's bleak. And my background was education. I can't be going in the streets in the morning, going to work, and then seeing the children literally fishing plastic out of the trash so that their parents could set a fire and then cook, and 2 years of non-proper food, if any. And as an educator, you look at that and you're like, that's formative childhood years. That child should be going out early morning to go to school, or they should do that with full stomach, and they should eat food that would enable them to grow and to be healthy and to be able to think and learn and to be the best they can in life. And you look at that, and you look at the fact that all these kids are now displaced, they have nowhere to go, their parents are either one or both are dead, or unable to support them on, a physical, basic sense, let alone an emotional one. And you look at that and it's hard to be hopeful under these circumstances, but this is why we go out and we work. And this is exactly one of the reasons why when I met Darwa and I met like what Inara was doing and like trying to a little bit to like help out with that, because that's focused about children. And as cliche as that sounds, children are our future, and if we don't give them a fighting chance to become real people, to become adjusted members of society, then what hope do we have?
So, Anya, what do you think a group like this, we're sitting in a church, we have an audience that is very mixed, people, church members, we got people coming in from around Orange County, San Diego, LA. How do you feel that taking advantage of this moment, Carpe Diem, what can we do? What can this group do you feel that would be meaningful, that would be helpful? Every day we say we want to help, but we're not really sure what would be impactful. What would you say that thing would be? And I just want to also thank the church here. I understand you have a program where is Pastor Mark here? I don't know if somebody can just tell us about the program that you have with some of the kids. Bobby, is that something that goes to? Yeah, yes.
Beryl, can you do that? Here, Beryl, you tell me.
Yeah, Beryl, I mean, if you would please, just briefly about what is that program?
It's a program of our denomination called Thy Children. Churches for Peace. Oh, thank you. That's right. Churches for Middle East Peace. Thy Children Live. And we adopt the name of a child in Gaza. We've adopted Miriam. And so we keep Miriam in our prayers every Sunday and in our committee meetings to remind us of the children of Gaza. So that's part of the program.
It's very hard to fully comprehend the depth of the trauma on a child. And do you remember one of the first people I met when I was in that first trip was this mother that came up, and basically she figured out that we do work with children, and she came up and she grabbed my arm and she was like, I don't know what to do about my son, because my little boy every night grabs his hair, walks back and forth, and is screaming, and I think he's gonna explode into hysteria. And the reason why he's doing this is because he saw his little sister's head blow off. And I was very much stunned into that same silence. And this mother must have seen something on my face, because then she went on to say, when I asked her, where were you? And she said, I was in the room, which meant that she saw the same thing. She must have seen something on my face, because she was speaking in a very, very monotone, even tone about all of this. And she said, I have to. I don't have a choice because I have other children. And it was in that moment, like within my first, 20 minutes being in Gaza, having that interaction, that I realized the trauma on the children and the way it was manifesting in her son. But then you also realize the trauma on the adults and on these parents, where they have to shove their pain down so far, so deep, that they can't even let their voices crack. Because if they even let their voice crack, then they're gonna break. And I know from Hanya that even she herself, like, you had to shove your own pain down so deep to be able to keep going, just like everybody else has. And that to me is like, people of Gaza don't want to be called heroes and they don't want to be called resilient because it's the situation that they've been forced into. But to me, that quality that they have is extraordinary, as is this kindness and this. I have never in my life come across the level of kindness that I have seen in Gaza. And I think that too is like a huge part of what it means to be continuously resisting, because it's not just about like resisting occupation, it's about resisting toxicity and resisting losing your own humanity to a certain degree, isn't it?
That's absolutely correct. I think that was one of the biggest challenges. So you live 2 years through that, yeah? And you have to work, and you need to, in your ability as a person, whether you're a parent, whether you're an aid worker, whether you are someone who's trying to be there for their friend, you have some sort of duty to give. And we as people, not even that, we as people in the society, everyone's going through their own thing. We have this unwritten agreement that we can put up more on each other's plates. So everyone was keeping saying each other, in a sense. And there's also this realization that if you just take a minute and you process the stuff that are going, like to live in real time, and to process the fact that this is happening, that you are actively being slaughtered, that you have no agency, that you barely can help people, that you have no idea what's going to happen the next day, the next hour, the next minute. You have no idea where all that. If all these ideas are present in your head, you would lose your mind and you wouldn't be able to function. And that was just trying to navigate through choices. And and the third thing that is quite hard is, if you think about all these things, you can't be both. You can't be human and be going through what you're going through. You can't be a real person and for the world to let what's happening happen. You can't be a person and be sane and awake and aware and look at the news and see that the peace plan is actively negotiating how much food is coming in. Because if you accept that, if you accept this to be reality, you're not a person. Like it can't be both. Both can't be true. And it's all of these things that you got carry on in a day that you just need to mute for your sake, for people around you, for the sake sheer ability for survival. Because you don't have luxury of that. You have to do the next thing. If there's an evacuation order, you have to figure out where you're going to go next. You have to figure out how you're going to get there. If there's no transport. If there is not enough food, like for most of those few years, there wasn't enough food. And especially the last couple of months before the ceasefire, every day we'll just try to create something and you'll have a meal that, a genuine meal would need like 16 different ingredients. You'll have 4. And you would want to somehow make that work out. And it's usually just bread or rice or that kind of stuff.
And the terrible thing is that there are world natural disasters that force that on people. But this is where you have trucks full of food waiting at the border, not being allowed to come in. This is a weapon of war that is being used against the population that's totally, armless, sitting there waiting, as you described. And your words are so powerful about your feeling as a human, as a person. Sorry, Arwa, go ahead, you're saying. We can't hear you, Arwa. Don't know what happened.
Yeah, we've lost your voice there.
Stuart!
But I want to bring up something very important. How many times have you heard people say when we speak of this genocide that it's complicated or it's too much to handle? Think about that. We're in this most comfortable atmosphere. We're not in danger. And then you just heard from Hania what it's like to live minute by minute, not knowing what's going to happen next. To live in a state where you're seeing your child be blown to pieces, but you have another child you have to take care of. How is this complicated?
To go off of what you're talking about, this whole idea of it's complicated. You're right, it's not. It's absurd. It's Machiavellian. It's a lot of things, but it's definitely not complicated. And just to give you a couple of ideas of what we go through as humanitarians, I think it was UNICEF had trucks and trucks and trucks of pallets of food aid that were not permitted entry into Gaza because they contained peanut butter. Peanut butter being a high nutrient energy source, much needed for the population, that Israel categorized as non-essential. That's one example of things. Not to mention, it's this constant sort of strategy of deprivation that keeps people on the edge of suffocation. And, you know, it's not just about getting the food in, it's about getting the shelter in so that people's tents aren't flooding. It's about a most basic measure of dignity in life, of being able to go to the bathroom in private. And think about right now the way that it's raining and flooding, and the reality that the vast majority of 2 million people have been going to the bathroom outside in holes that they've had to dig. But that's not sewage. So when it rains, that all overflows. And right now there are 3 children in the ICU because yet another disease has cropped up that is normally transmitted by animal feces. And when we talk about things like, we need hygiene kits into Gaza, we need soap into Gaza, that sounds very banal. But you can save a child's life with a bar of soap. And people don't realize this, nor do they fully realize kind of all of the barriers and barricades that actually exist to try to, it's not just about robbing a person of their actual life. It is this almost ongoing effort to rob an entire population of its will to live by just making it so impossible.
Actually, that's incredibly correct. I feel like I lived through the entire war, and one of the hardest moments for me was when the famine happened. And I remember one day when I went home from work a bit late, and we were living off of 1 meal a day then. And it was like a window, so if you got the opportunity to eat, then you did, and you didn't, and you lost your chance because there's no cooking energy. So my family would start a fire, that would be it. Like, they would start one fire, one meal, because there wasn't much immediate interaction. So I went home and I wanted to eat something, and there was nothing, and I opened the fridge. And you know, you do these things like out of muscle memory, and I went to fix myself a sandwich, and I opened this fridge, and I realized there's nothing that you can make a sandwich out of. Like, there's no bread even, let alone like, you know, salami or cheese or whatever. And that was the day that I realized, oh, I'm living through famine. That was the day that it clicked, because the other thing about working in aid is that a lot of times you switch a lot of hats. Like, you're in a UN meeting, you're an organization representative, you're working with people, you're a humanitarian aid worker, but you're back home, you're affecting population. So a lot of times, all these like get in a bit of haze. And that was the day I realized, oh, I am affected by this the same way as everyone else. And it sounds so straightforward, but to me it was like mind-blowing. And it was one of the hardest moments because I lived in Gaza my entire life. And there's no freedom of movement. Your life is completely controlled by the siege that I've grew into. I grew up under siege. And when I realized that, when the famine happened, I realized that I don't even have agency over the food that I consume. And that someone just gets to switch that off whenever they please. They choose what I eat, what I don't eat, when I eat. And that was incredibly hard to process because the baseline is very low. I have no freedom of movement. Whenever there's a war, my entire social security is out of the window. None of our belongings, like most of our houses, were gone. But that was different. That was a different level of humiliation to realize that. That's not up to you, right? And even when I got here, even when I left, it's just still the same thing. Like, I would have the groceries and I would look at them in the fridge and my first instinct is maybe I should trash them. Or why do I have access to this now? And then I check stuff in logs and I realize that half these things are still not allowed because you can buy a bar of chocolate, but you can't buy milk. Or you can buy a candy, but you can't buy eggs at a reasonable price. You look at all of these things, and it's none of it is haphazard, none of it is random. because the people of Gaza are not allowed to cultivate vegetables, which they were completely self-reliant on prior to this war. They're not, none of the seedlings or the seeds of that stuff are allowed to come in. It's such a system where people are reliant on the bare minimum of calories, of caloric intake of foods that are by nature unnutritious. So that whenever, the numbers or the amounts are so minimal that people can't store, it's not enough for your overall health. When people count the deaths, as Barbara mentioned, they don't count how many people died out of like the myriad of curable diseases, lack of nutrients, all that stuff. Even I remember when I was working and I was in close communication with the UN, NGOs, and all of these things. And when the ban was announced, it was a bit too late, right? Well, because I was working in that system, I knew why. It was because the number of the children that died out of hunger, not all of them were counted, because they decided that it would only be counted if someone is still in health. They needed enough healthy people to die out of hunger for it to be called a famine.
So just to clarify on that a little bit too, so basically starvation, malnutrition takes the ill, the elderly, and the youngest first. And so the first to die of starvation were the elderly, and they were children who had congenital illnesses. And the UN system, because it says, well, we can't definitively say that this case died of starvation, it might have been due to their underlying illness, wasn't counting those numbers. So they were waiting for fully healthy children to die of starvation before actually declaring a famine.
They were literally just counting the numbers.
You know, actually, I wanted to share something that Tanya said to me the other day, because I take notes when she talks.
We've lost your voice again.
Suanne!
So, I just want to mention one thing. From hearing everything that's been said, we're looking at generational impact. And we're looking at generations of kids that are orphaned, that are maids, the psychological impact for generations. And all of this is happening under our watch and with our tax dollars, which is the hardest part to swallow. So, you know, each one of us in here has a role to play. And then I,
Say something, Owen.
or what? No.
No, we'll try.
I'm gonna go to some of the questions that we've gotten from the audience, and I'll start with this one. It's written, "Hi, my name is Nilia, and I'm 9 years old. What can I do to help everyone in Palestine as a child in America?"
Wow. One is prayer. That is always a helpful. Sylvia's church, that can help as a 9-year-old. But it's amazing how a 9-year-old talking to her classmates, as simple as talking to people like classmates, we very often kind of dread talking about this, and we live almost in a double world. I know my girls are now older, but I know at the younger age, there was always that fear. Where do you come from? Middle East. Then ultimately they dig deeper before it comes, Palestine. You know what I'm saying? So there's something about us that we should be more back to making films or projecting who we are and where we come from, because we really have become a symbol of resistance, even though Hamas was kind of classified as a terrorist organization, but so was Nelson Mandela, and so was his organization, as were the IRA. But then, when there is peace and there's opportunities, these are the people that were fighting for your cause. They were no longer terrorists. They became the representation of that country. And it's unfortunate here, because in our minds, Hamas are terrorists. They have no place to stay, no place wherever. And that's what's happening now. Only people who are subdued, shut up, accept it as it comes, then that's okay. You dare to stand up for your rights, then you're a terrorist and we're going to get rid of you. And as we all know, somebody's terrorists are other people's freedom fighters. And that's the part where Again, it's the United States that dictates, but it's amazing. Just yesterday, or the day before yesterday, Trump was calling Zohran Mamdani a communist, and Mamdani was calling him a narcissist and all these names, and a fascist. They come together and they come up loving, hugging, and saying, whoa, you know, same faults I had, we're of the same. Anyway, so the idea is, this is a war of ideas. And Israel has been phenomenal at propaganda, whether it's the 40-beheaded babies, or whether they are able to control the narrative about it's a Hamas-Israel war. And that's what everybody reports it. It's not. It's killing a genocide against Palestinian, ethnic cleansing in an apartheid state. That narrative is what needs to be out. And even a 9-year-old should be at her school telling her friends, I'm Palestinian and we are being abused. And this is time for people to stand with us so we can liberate ourselves and feel free.
Am I back?
Yeah.
Am I back?
I'll just echo what he was saying, but to go back to this idea of it's complicated. It's absurd, as was said, but it's also just lazy. It's lazy. For so long, these legacy media companies had the same people come on their shows. They had their talking points from who knows. You know, I think it's definitely APAC was involved with a lot of these talking points. But the idea of what he said, like, the solution is what we're doing in this room, the dialogue, the millions of conversations, and carrying that forward. So if you leave today and you're empowered by some of the things that you've heard and some of these personal stories, go take a friend out for coffee. You know, tell them about these films, tell them about what you've learned. That is going to change. That's going to, these small things that you can do that you're in control of, like we can't change Congress tomorrow, right? But you can carry forward these conversations, and I just want to continue to encourage this in person.
We're showing the film at Congress. I don't know who will attend, but we may, and also at the House of Parliament in the UK as well. And hopefully, again, these are the stories that will touch. I mean, you can be oblivious about this for a while, but when you start seeing stories and hearing it, eventually change will happen. And change will never seem impossible until it becomes inevitable.
Quick, you talked about Mamdani and Trump. In politics, there's a saying that you never have permanent enemies or permanent friends. They interchange, so.
Yeah, the permanent alliance, there's like, as long as they're aligned on.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. All right, we're gonna turn it back over to you.
Oh, yay, we are back. Well, there's a couple of things I wanted to share, but I first want to go back to the question asked by the 9-year-old. And here's the thing is, I actually also believe that it's incredibly vital to undertake, small projects like, and I'm just throwing this out there as an idea, but if she were to get her classroom to do a remote Zoom with, for example, either a group of their peers in Gaza so that they could have a direct conversation, or for example, like my charity, we have 350 children in surgery in Cairo. We have 1,000 children in schools there. We could do some kind of Zoom remote interaction, because there's huge value in awakening a child's sensibilities at that age. Look, I'm Syrian American. I grew up very bicultural. My mom opened my eyes to the injustices around the world at a very early age. And I understand that it's a, decision that every parent has to individually make, but there's a way to, introduce a child, very gently into the world of other children who are not as fortunate as they are, but also allow them to connect in that very sort of basic human level, in the way that children have a way of asking questions, of each other that is okay, and that does create these lasting, bonds and memories. And I think that's very important. And I also want to add to the whole idea of, we can't do anything, and this notion that, no matter how much we donate, it doesn't make a difference. I promise you it makes a difference. Like, even in the height of the famine, even when nothing is getting into Gaza, your money is being spent. At the height of the famine, yes, I was spending my charity was spending an absurd amount of money trying to get these small vegetable parcels, so a couple of Gaza's greenhouses were still functioning. We paid $170 for 10 pounds of cucumbers and tomatoes. And I know that sounds crazy, but that made a difference to the families that we were able to take it to. And what we're seeing right now, because there is this whole idea that, oh, it's the ceasefire, you know, the 20-point peace plan, the war is over, things are fine. We're actually seeing a significant, startling decline in donations to Gaza. And lastly, I'm sorry, Hanya, I'm going to share your words. So Hanya said this to me yesterday. She said, people still don't see us as human. People compare the situation to the baseline, which was us being bombed and starved. They don't compare it to the life that we had before. They don't use the life that we had before as the baseline of what we deserve. And they sure as hell don't compare an acceptable baseline for Gaza to their own baseline. And I think we have to keep reminding ourselves of that the standard that we need to push our politicians, our leaders, our communities for is the baseline of the lives that we have, because that is a life. Anything less than that is not life.
And if I may add something. The Israeli army has moved lines in Gaza, not out of Gaza, they moved. And what I found out is they make sure they have access to the fertile land that exists in Gaza. So this is part of their systematic famine and starvation policy, not allowing the Palestinians to actually farm and benefit from feeding themselves. But the other thing, if you don't mind, if I can ask you, Hanya, Gaza has a history that is so rich that, you know, over civilization, over time, it played a major role in the silk routes and the trades and the Mediterranean. And most people don't know that the 2.2 million, you know, half of those came out of Tel Aviv and came out of all these cities. So these people are already displaced, and now they're living in that place, but are now being displaced multiple times, and the hope is to get them ethnically cleansed entirely. But those are not coming from just nowhere, they're coming from Israel today. And that's what people very often say, why was it so concentrated? They're concentrated in that surrounded, and people think, and back to the October 7th, the bombing and the killing that Israel is doing now happened 4 times prior. Not to this magnitude, but to a very serious magnitude, where entire neighborhoods were demolished. And they used to call it mowing the lawn. 4 times prior that has happened. So saying that, and at one point I made a presentation here about great decisions, where I showed in 2018, 2019, there was a total strike by the Palestinians of Gaza, walking out to the wall and saying, enough is enough, we can't have this. Since 2017, they're under land, sea blockade. They can't get anything. Only whatever Israel decides, they can get. Many people don't know that. So when you imprison somebody and you keep pushing them down, what do you expect? They're gonna go back and defend and do whatever they can. That was what October 7th was you've been putting us so down, we gotta go back and defend for our rights. Because when they tried to do this in a peaceful way, when they got there, they were being shot. There were 200 people shot and thousands injured. So again, just to put things in perspective, here, it's always any article you read about, and even this pro-Palestinian article comes back October 7th. That was the triggering action to everything. And it was one of a multiple things that have been going on for so long. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also want to bring up, Errol mentioned, having these Zoom calls with children in Gaza. But in California, we have AB 715. How many of you guys are familiar with that bill? No? It's literally shutting down any voice that speaks up for Palestine. And it's a monitor that's going to monitor public education to make sure that there are no anti-Semitic conversations. But the definition of anti-Semitic conversations is very broad. So even speaking of Palestine, speaking of Gaza is anti-Semitic and will not be allowed in public schools. So look up 8715, which just passed recently.
And by ordinance?
It passed by both the Assembly and the Senate and signed by our governor. So I'm going to go back to another question from the audience, and this is, what is the status of visas allowed for children in Gaza for treatment in the USA?
So first of all, if we're talking about medical evacuation, so right now, specifically.
Oh, sorry, we just lost your voice again.
Suanne!
So maybe I'll go for another question. And it's, how difficult would it be to have a Palestinian film festival here in the Orange, or in OC? Is that something that can be done?
Watermelon Pictures, actually that might be an invitation, on December 12th. I believe that is a Saturday, or December 13th, a Saturday. I'll invite you, Watermelon is coming to screen their movie Palestine 36, and also tell us more about Watermelon Pictures, and maybe that would be a question that we ask them to do that. Because if anybody will do it, it will be them. Me and you have to.
Absolutely.
There's something also, like film festivals are kind of a big thing to organize. There's a lot of programming. There's staff. It does take a lot of resources. But to build on what he was saying, a lot of our films have educational licenses as well, and so you can request to do a community screening. Like you can actually, like even for my last film, you can contact our educational distributor. You can pick a venue, even a venue like this. You can try to put it on yourself, and there's support from the filmmaking team, from the distributor. So you don't necessarily have to wait for a film festival. You could simply request, say, hey, we want to do a screening of The Voice of Pen Rajab, and I think we could get 100 people there. Do it. Like we encourage it. We don't make these films for our egos. We don't make this film, just to make money. Like we make it for an audience. So please, like, reach out to the filmmakers.
Yes, you got that. So we're talking about the status of visas allowed for children from Gaza to get treatment here in the U.S.
Right, so, no, right now at this point, that whole visa process to be able to bring children to the US is frozen, is horrendous. But unfreezing that actually isn't necessarily the solution to the bigger problem of the fact that there are 16,500 people on a medical evacuation list inside Gaza waiting to be able to get out. This is not just an America problem. This is a world problem that is absolutely egregious, because right now the barrier to those 16,500 people getting out, I think roughly half of which are children, is not just Israel. It's that countries globally are not stepping forward and saying, we will take children. If you look at the numbers right now, Egypt has the highest number of cases, followed by, I think it's, Qatar and the UAE. Europe has an abysmally low rate. And I have a friend of mine who's a journalist in Germany who was looking into this. And there's a city in Germany that basically said, you know what, we as a city, we will cover medical, we'll cover everyone's housing, we'll cover everything. We're willing to take 50 kids. They just needed the German government to coordinate all of it with the Israelis, and the German government said no. Well, guess what Germany actually just did evacuate from Gaza and treat in Germany? 4 donkeys. And I'm not joking. And
Are they doing okay?
Trying to get kids to the U.S. is, yes, important and significant, but what we also need to do is look at different alternatives. Like, if getting them to America is too complicated, how do we treat them locally? If Europe continues to refuse to take cases, how do we then work with countries in the region to try to see if we can get them to take even more cases and move this forward? And I just would be a bit remiss to not sort of talk about, the situation, in Gaza and Gaza's history, and give Hania a bit of a chance to address, what Muhammad was talking about and also what he was asking kind of about, I guess it's a brief rundown of how we got to where we are today. Because I have to add this in before I'll pass it over to you. What I always found very striking is that there's this attitude among people on the outside, whether they're Palestinian or not, whether they live in the West Bank or outside, of it's okay, Gaza will sacrifice. And there is a sense among a lot of people in the population in Gaza that they are the sacrificial lambs for something that they weren't given a choice in at all. No one was asked, are you willing to sacrifice everything for what it is that, is being done to you?
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important to keep in mind. And when we're thinking about the history of Gaza, so Gaza has been under a siege for 17 years. It has been literally on lockdown. No one can go in or out unless they go into gauntlet things that they need to accomplish. Even if that's also haphazard if you get approvals or not. So it's completely hard. I remember something that would sound a little bit absurd, but one of the things that we were very proud of recently, like before the war, was that we were finally able to buy stuff online. And it wasn't a dark process either. You would buy through a third party, and the third party would deliver it in like a week or in 2 weeks' time, and you'd be like, oh my God, and looked at something on the internet, and it showed up. And it was one of these things, like, I think that kind of like reflects how simple life in Gaza was. It's such a suffocating closure that people ended up being used to in a way or so. I mean, no one should live under these circumstances, but we lived under these circumstances for 17 years. People tried to tried to protest peacefully for the right to return, and then they were shot, they were killed. A lot of things happened then. The other thing is that Muhammad said, and it is completely correct, is that most of Gaza's population are internally displaced refugees who are from different parts of Palestine or different parts of what is now called Israel. My parents and my grandparents are no different. We are from a village in Rabde, which is now part of Israel. We're not given the chance to return. And I remember growing up and listening to my grandma's stories of how she was forced to leave her homeland, and how they were told that it would be a couple of days, and how they had this olive grove, and how it was beautiful, and how they had almonds, and they had all these different things. And I remember I was a child and I felt a bit irked by the repetitive narrative. And I was like, it's fine, we need to just survive for what we have now. Like, there's no point of picking up old wounds. Although it's not that old, like I'm third generation of refugees. But then the 7th happened, and the Gaza genocide happens, and then it just clicks that this is just a continuation of this grievances, this generational trauma, this generational persecution, and then it just somehow all this generational hurt connected in a way. And now I understand how my grandparents felt. Because it happened again. And even my children, how can I tell them that this wouldn't happen to them again? And that's the thing that a lot of people miss. It's like a lot of times people go to Palestinians and they ask, why aren't you playing along? Why aren't you letting Israel exist? And it's like, Israel exists, but the Palestinian state doesn't. We are forced to live in very small places, and not even better that. Every couple of years, there's a land mowing strategy that every couple of years there's a new war, there's a new destruction, there's a new damage, there's a new bombardment. And because of how repetitive we are, and because of this status quo that's built in people's minds, it just becomes background noise. And then a war happens, and the next day, when it stops, the next day we need to go to work again and we need to function. And this has been the reality of most of my adult life. And it's like, it is that narrative. Like, a lot of people would like to negotiate, like a lot of people would like to discuss who came first. Why is this person here? Should this exist? Should this not? But we're in now. We're in this position right now where there is a population that is being prosecuted, that is being ethnically cleansed in real time. And there's no point talking about these things. The point is now is that Palestinians need reparations. We need reparations. People need to go back to their place of origin. Israel, a two-state solution needs to happen, and it needs to be inclusive to everyone. And it's not a crazy ask. It's not a complicated thing. And even when we're talking about the security of Israel, how is this secure? How is bombing this population of people continuously, how is that defending a state? How is that defending the future? How is that defending future of mutual understanding? How are people going to be able to put aside their differences if everything is just made so fresh and so raw, so cruel perpetually? We weren't able to eat anything proper for months and months on end. And I remember one day we were like, we need to eat something with protein. And then we bought these fish. Like, we weren't allowed, the fishermen weren't allowed to fish, and they would end up literally fishing by the coastline. And we got this very, very small fish, like you can't even use as a bait. And we cooked it whole, and we were like, oh, we ate fish today, we ate protein. And it's like, this is not by coincidence, it's perpetual, even before the war. Fishermen can't fish freely. They can't, like anything beyond 6 kilometers, they'll be shot at. Most of the buffer zone is a no-go zone. A lot of farmers would farm and then would struggle, would literally have to play dodgeball with bullets to be able to collect their crops. This is not a matter of a population that isn't able to support itself. This is a matter of a population that is perpetually made in need. We need real change. We need real change for people to be able to recover and we can't talk about peace and talk about bombing. Like, it can't work logically. It cannot work. And whatever happened on the 7th or whatever it has happened, it's just a symptom of the disease, assuming it happened in the same manner that we see in the media. Nothing is clear about it. Like, if I think that someone is made to be, if I make someone othered, and I assume that to be a solution, that it's not. If people go out and say the 7th happened, and it's like a natural reaction to everything that happened, it's also not correct, because most of the people in Gaza didn't choose that. And everything that has happened since that moment till now, to this very moment, is just perpetual acts of collective punishment. The case that a lot of students can go to their country, can go to continue their education, is a part of that. The reason why a lot of these students can't get their children with them is a part of that. The reason why a lot of the medical cases are not being extracted is a part of that. We're being seen as a collective, as if we basically ascribed ourselves to it, that every one of us signed up to what happened in the 7th, when in reality we all woke up, fought to the news as everyone else. None of us were consulted. And even when a lot of people talk about the fact that people voted for Hamas, most of the people living now in Gaza haven't been born or were very, very young when Hamas was elected. And even the people who elected Hamas, no one was like, I'm sure you know that no one put in their election campaign of, oh, we wake up one day and we will, start an attack that would be so gruesome and so horrible, and none of that is usually not put in anyone's election campaign. So even the people who elected Hamas didn't elect them to do that. Like, it's such an easy way to understand the situation, to simplify the situation, that we end up failing to truly capture it. The reality on the ground is that there is this perpetual dehumanization, this perpetual enforcement of a reality where our very existence is being denied. And we need to fix that, not just for the Palestinian people who've seen so much, not even just for our children who need a chance to survive. We need that as well for the Israelis. Like, this is not sustainable. None of this is sustainable. And how do you think, how is this going to end up? Like, how is this going to end up? If people of Gaza were displaced indefinitely, like, how does that play out? Our countries ready to deliver this amount of people, to receive this amount of people, or are people's lives so frivolous that one day their children can't leave? What is the logic behind it? And I feel like a lot of times we forget these conversations because we end up in an intellectual conversation where we're like, oh, but this happened, but that happened, and we end up theorizing the case, theorizing what everyone is living in real time. We need to look forward, we need to look at solutions, we need to ask ourselves who's benefiting off of all this? Who's benefiting off of this mess?
Thank you, Hania.
And we, humans as collective human entity, what we agree to, that's crushed all of us. One way or another, it affects all of us because we're all interconnected, no matter where we are, no matter what background we're from, no matter what religion we hold or believe in. We are all interconnected, and everything that we let happen happens to us as well, in a way or another. If not, it takes away our humanity, and nothing is uglier than that.
Great.
And that's been the hardest fight that we fought during this war, is to be able to maintain yourself, your humanity, under the worst of circumstances. And I think it's just fair enough that the world reciprocates that.
Thank you. I want to thank you so much for having Hania there with you. This has been really just eye-opening. I mean, we know most of the stuff that's happening, but hearing it from you directly means so much. We're running out of time, and I know I have a couple of questions that I'm going to ask really quickly, short, quick answers to. One is, if someone wants to donate, whether it's for filmmaking or whether it's to organizations supporting the Palestinian people, where do they go?
That's not an easy question. So, send it to me, send it to Anthony, send it. No, I mean.
I'd be a really bad founder if I didn't plug my own organization, but
Absolutely.
it's INARA.org, INARA.org, the International Network for Aid, Relief, and Assistance. We are 501c3. But I do want to also mention that there are a bunch of extraordinary organizations, grassroots on the ground in Gaza. I, for example, am a huge fan of the Gaza Sunbirds. I think they're doing extraordinary work, and their own backstory is just so heartening. In brief, they are a group of amputees who lost their limbs in other bombings, and they formed this club called the Gaza Sunbirds, and they were a paracycling team. Now, as the war went on, people didn't have vehicles anymore, there was no fuel, and these guys would get on their bikes, because they still had their bicycles, they were paracyclers, and do aid deliveries. And from there, they kind of grew into doing more stuff. My charity, NADA, partners with them on quite a few projects. And they're also such a sort of incarnation of the way that Gazans will help Gazans to such a degree that if one family has a loaf of bread, they will share it with the tent next door instead of keeping it all for themselves. I'm a huge fan of their work, and there's a number of other sort of smaller entities that are in Gaza right now. I don't know if you want to mention some of them as well.
Yeah, there's the Gaza Little Lights. They're also helping children with malnutrition. It's also grassroots. And it's always nice to support smaller organizations because they usually have smaller overhead, they usually hire more locally, And they focus more on impact and on using most of the resources that they get to help the people. I honestly, like, a part of our work, we were partnering with Inaro, and it was amazing to put out the bus as they were helping the children and they were giving psychological support, but also there was a lot of support that was given to women and like providing women with sanitary products in the midst of war. That was also another challenge that women undergoes, like not even the war, but also their own.
This is interesting, Hania, how it goes. We're sitting here in Orange County, California, and we're thinking, how can we donate money to filmmakers? And this is where the world we live in, right? They're living in a world where they just want to find food to eat, want to find somebody to get out of, just get some treatment where they can operate upon with some sort of medication they can afford it. So the point here is they're working with the reptilian brain, fight and fight, and we're sitting here, we're thinking with the cortex, how can we do creative artwork, whatever. So it honestly gives the answer of the different worlds we're living in, but in the end, it's all necessary, it's all important. They need the basic needs to survive, and we need to be doing that work that can influence our policymakers, that can help people see the point of view, because there's a public opinion that we have to gain through the films, and there's also the policymakers that we have to gain, which will help also through the films. In the interim, there's the biggest need right now, I want to help people like Inara, people like Dr. Laila Mariati, she has Hinder USA, and others. I mean, there are many organizations. But honestly, having been working with Arwa recently, seeing her on the ground, seeing what she's done, if you guys are interested, again, this is not a fundraiser. This was not intended to be a fundraiser. But if anybody's moved and wants to support and consider that, please consider Inara. Look them up, inara.com.org. What is it?
Inara. Yeah.
INARA.
Can I say something real quick?
Sure,
Can we at the end of this collect a set of these nonprofits and just distribute it to everybody? Can we do that? I think that'd be helpful. Just get a list of these on the ground ones, if you wouldn't mind. We'd love that. And then we could also get some here, and let's just put that together and we'll send it out to everybody.
Great.
That'd be good?
Yeah.
That'd be great, thanks.
Now I'm going to the head of the UN and work with you. Thank you, sir.
That'd be great.
So I want to thank our panelists for joining us today. Thank you so much, Hannah, Karin, Arwa, and Hannah. Really appreciate you joining us here today. And I want to thank everyone in the audience as well for hearing this out. It is so important. But you do have homework, right? Now that you have a better understanding, that you heard firsthand of what's going on, it's upon you to share this information with others, to make sure that we are educating our neighbors, our families, our friends, so that we can do whatever it is possible on our end to end not only the genocide, but also take care of people that now are basically dealing with this trauma and are going to be dealing with it for years to come. So that's upon us, and I hope collectively we achieve that goal. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Farah, and thank you for the panelists. Please give them a round of applause. That was very enlightening, really. Our next speaker is going to be a student. Her name is Khurshid. Khurshid, where are you? Khurshid is... Khurshid is a soccer student. She is a dedicated student who was actively involved in the movement for Palestine and continues to do so. She will be speaking about the crucial role of students play in the movement and how our collective action can shape meaningful change. Please.
Hi everyone. I've been a student organizer and part of the encampments in communities across the. Oh, sorry, I'm not used to public speaking. Hi everyone, my name is Krishit and I've been a student organizer in communities and part of the encampments across Southern California and also briefly in Spain as well. But despite all of that, public speaking has never really been my strength. I'm usually working behind the scenes, organizing, teaching, kind of making sure things run smoothly for people who do hold the mic and speak. So I want to apologize in advance if I stumble over my words and at the same time promise that every word comes from a place of truth and honesty. So yeah. Student movements have always mattered. Every generation of students who has dared to challenge in the United States has been pretty much demonized. And we saw it happened during the Vietnam War, it happened during the anti-apartheid movement, and it happens every single time us as young people kind of expose the truths that governments and corporations often profit from hiding. So when we as students standing for Palestine were being attacked with the same ruthless tactics, it didn't really come to us as a surprise. We learned about it, we read about it, we knew it was coming. And of course, as these movements were being disrupted, we were also being demonized by the media. Like if you open the news, you would immediately see we were labeled as disruptive, we were labeled as dangerous, we were labeled as naive, when all in fact that we were doing was holding our own institutions accountable for an actual genocide. But we were kind of seen as a hindrance to people who just wanted to live their lives. And so, as we kind of know from studying history, when you're standing with the oppressed, you quite literally are standing on the right side of history usually. So just to kind of start off, what's happening, as we know, what's happening in Gaza is not complicated and it's not a conflict and it's not two equal sides. It is a genocide, and I think it's important that we do call it exactly as it is. Entire neighborhoods were wiped out, families have been erased, lineages have gone in a single airstrike, homes, hospitals, universities, and refugee camps flattened, food and blocked, as we've heard. Children are starved, journalists are targeted. There's no moral ambiguity here, and there's no academic language that can really soften the reality. We're watching a genocide in real time, and instead of protecting the victims, the world is lecturing us as witnesses. And people keep trying to intellectualize what is happening. But there's really nothing philosophical about mass death. I could write about 1,000 papers in my class, but it's not really going to do as much as if you are actually making real change in the spaces that you're in. And so there's nothing really neutral about state violence. Even as you're writing about it, if you do want to make a change in educational places, when you start writing about it, you're immediately shut down by professors, you're immediately shut down by a lot of the administration because it's too political. But I don't really think there's anything political or complicated about children being pulled from rubble and families being murdered. And as students in the US, I do think it's really important that we acknowledge that we live in a contradiction that's impossible to ignore. We do hold a lot of privilege with safety, housing, education, and a platform, while we watch people already in Gaza experience displacement, hunger, and death. The consequences we face for speaking up, like, for example, arrest, suspension, disciplinary action, are nothing compared to what Palestinians face every minute of their lives. And we have the privilege of fear, actually, whereas Palestinians live the reality of death every day. So, as students, I heard one of the panelists talk about this, but I still want to briefly touch on it. As students who have gotten our education in the US, you learn about the genocide in school, and the biggest one you learn about is the Holocaust. It's taught as something that was unmistakable, undeniable, and it's universally condemned. You're taught never again, and you're kind of presented like it was this moral absolute, we don't want to repeat history. And yet here we are, we're witnessing another genocide in real time, and we're being told to sit down, stay quiet, focus on our careers as students, focus on getting these essays done, focusing on trying to get this job. And the reason I say this is because when you ask people why they haven't talked about Palestine or why they try to remain neutral, the answer is almost always fear. Fear of consequences, fear of backlash, fear of losing something, fear of seeming too much or being too complicated. But the truth is that whatever we risk here and whatever consequences we've imagined for ourselves is, again, still nothing to what Palestinian families have been enduring for generations. Not just since October, it's obviously worsened since then, but this has been going on for generations. And so another thing I actually wanted to make really clear, because I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about movements and protests, is that not everyone needs to protest in the streets to be a part of this movement. It's a huge part of it, and I fully do encourage people to. Also, every movement requires many roles, and we often glorify like the orator, the person with the megaphone, or the mic in this case. But movements are built by so many others too. We have the healers who are tending to the injured and the exhausted bodies, the teachers running political education and passing down history. We have the strategists planning logistics for these protests, the artists and the storytellers shaping narrative and memory, the caretakers who are cooking meals and maintaining encampments. A lot of our encampments couldn't have been done if it wasn't for the thousands of families who would come and bring in food for us all the time. The researchers who dug through university budgets to expose complicity, the communicators who translate all these complex languages and clarity into something for clarity that's accessible to everyone, and the organizers essentially, everyone who's there to make sure everything actually functions. So these roles are not smaller or bigger, they're all essential, and they're the backbone of resistance. So if you cannot directly put your body on the line of the protest, it is okay, and because I understand some people can't embrace the rest, and that is okay, but support them, boycotts, push for divestment, bring food or supplies to the encampments, donate to mutual aids. There are many places you can donate directly to Palestinian families. Run teach-ins, host reading groups, build community, because no movement wins because of just one person. Movements win because thousands of people each carry one corner of that weight, and none of that really requires heroism, it just requires solidarity. The encampments we saw across the world also prove that students understand their power even when institutions pretend not to. So we demanded that the university stop profiting from genocide and that they stop hiding behind, bureaucracy and PR. And even when the encampments were small, and even when universities moved quickly to suppress us, and even when police were called in with batons of violence, we kept going. And that is what scares administrators and politicians the most. It's this idea of moral clarity. So we had courage, and that scared them a lot, and this refusal to be intimidated into silence, and this refusal to let genocide become a background noise. So as a final note, I do just need to say this for students, especially US students, we are not the face of the movement, and we should never pretend that the students in the US are the center of the struggle. I think that's a really big part to say, and I don't think it's said enough, which is why I want to end on that note. But the heart of this movement is Palestinians, the people who have survived occupation, siege, bombardment, displacement, and the destruction of entire communities. Our job is to not speak over them or speak for them. Our job is to simply amplify, support, and follow their lead, and to act in ways that materially reduce harm. So we must always remember whose liberation we are fighting for and whose leadership we must honor. And the genocide is not over, the fight is not over. I know we hear about the ceasefire, but as was said, hundreds are murdered every day still. And none of this ends until Palestine is free from occupation, siege, apartheid, and erasure. So I encourage everyone, as I said, to really open their phones, find organizations near you, join student groups, join community groups, join boycotts, get involved in these networks that are consistent and material and really rooted in solidarity. And don't really lose sight of what matters. Do not allow fear or news outlets or this news cycle, academic pressure, burnout to convince you that your voice doesn't matter. It really does. And every movement has its singers, its builders, its caretakers, its fighters, its thinkers. And I think it's really important to just find your role and fill that role with your whole heart. So yeah.
لو كنت مغمض عيني وتاخدني لأحلام من ايديا
beautiful way to end the program. I would like to thank each one of you for being here, for supporting the Palestinian children. It takes a local dedication and a global effort to ensure that the children of Palestine continue to be heard, their stories continue to be told, and their resilience continue to be inspired. Thank you all. I have simple gifts from UNA for our participants. Where are you? All our participants, please step in. I hope you will go home. The pastor, where is Pastor Mark? I hope he's here.
He's getting ready for worship.
Oh, okay. Maybe Suhaib, you can take that for him?
Sure.
I trust that. Thank you. Sorry. That's for you. Good job. Of course, doctor, filmmaker, executive producer. Our favorite Farah Khan.
Yes.
He's amazing. And, okay, remind me, I'm too emotional, I'm too excited.
by Zoom?
Yeah, actually, I was thinking of that, but she's on Zoom.